How's things going?
Oh, it's super hot here in the UK at the moment, something we're not used to. So,
We we
yeah,
we
most of
we're
the
gonna
time.
we're gonna have to clarify super hot because super hot in Africa and super hot where you are two very different things.
Very different. Yeah, we're like, it's 30 degrees. Do you guys do
Ooh.
Celsius or Fahrenheit?
Celsius.
30 degrees outside, 55 in this room. So yeah, it's a hot one.
Well, it's winter here, and it's probably about a sweltering 22 in the midst of winter, so not too bad.
Dude, I would so take that right now. Like, I wish we could just do 20 to 25 consistently for like 3 months. And I'm sure most of the UK would be like, thank you, God, thank you. But we haven't got that. We have these crazy extremes, or not even extremes, just rubbish grey wet weather and then the odd hot day.
It's a strange one because you're constantly geared up for the cold with like central heating and that kind of stuff, but when the heat comes around, nobody knows what to do.
We've got no aircon. No one has air unless you're a millionaire, you don't have aircon. No one has a pool. So that's another thing. So yeah, it's all good though. It adds to the character of the place.
Fantastic, man. Well, John, I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for your time. I really, really do appreciate it. I'm excited to have a chat to you and get some of your insights, man. It's crazy how the sport of MMA can drag people from all around the world together and have a chat about some like-minded interests, which is really, really exciting.
Yes.
Where I wanted to start with you is a question: which came first? Was it martial arts in a personal journey, or the UFC? Which one of them arrived in your life first?
Oh, martial arts. I've been involved in martial arts since I was 7. So it's pretty much molded in one way or another. It's influenced my life, molded the way that I am now. Yeah, since all the way back when I was a wee boy.
And the journey to the UFC, how did that all come about? I know, especially with jiu-jitsu, once jiu-jitsu has its claws in your life, you tend to be spending a lot of time on the mats, and those things kind of progress. It's a similar sort of journey for myself. On how I got into a podcast talking about MMA was basically through combat sports and jiu-jitsu especially. How did you go from martial arts to being the golden voice of the UFC? How did that all transpire?
I'm not quite sure about the golden voice, but it's a bit of a weird one. I mean, I've been, as I say, I've been involved in martial arts and combat sports since a young age, and I've chopped and changed a bit. And over here, football's a big thing. None of my friends really did combat sports, so I was always in and out. Never really stuck around in anything too long. But when I started getting involved properly in combat sports once again in my sort of late 20s, like more Muay Thai and MMA than grappling. Like, I didn't put the gi on for a very long time. It was definitely more about like the combat sports side, and I was on my own journey. I wanted to test myself, so I was part of a team. Changed teams because our coach, where we were, a guy called Mark Chen, who was a student of Jess Laudan, he moved up north, and we went to a gentleman called David Lee, who fought in the UFC. He hadn't long appeared in the UFC, I don't think, when I joined him. I think that's right. So yeah, back in like 2008, 2009. So yeah, I was with Dave for a while. I was still doing other stuff, a bit more senior years, if you like. So I was running a business with my dad, like on the verge of getting married, all of these sorts of things. So grown up stuff. I was never kind of like a gym rat because I just had other things going on. But
Sure.
I was very involved in and loved the sport and things of that nature. And eventually, my coach gave me the opportunity to commentate on his own show, and it really just it spiraled from there. I was getting involved in lots of other things like writing reports at fight events and doing bits and pieces, volunteering my time for like a safety project within mixed martial arts over here in the UK. So trying to just help in whichever way I could. Like, I didn't really like the way that the sport was being painted in the UK by the UK media. Still don't. And so I thought, well, if you've got a problem with something, then you really need to do something about it. And I did have what I thought was some skills close to sort of presenting, etc., from my time at the BBC in my early 20s. It was a very short time, but I'd always harbored that intention. So it all came back around with martial arts. Weirdly, everything that I've done, everything like extracurricular, work-wise, it all has met to this point where it's this passion has met like a productive side where I feel like I can add value through my experiences over a commercial career which has meandered, and a sporting, like a weekend warrior sporting career, if you like, to where we are today. And I feel like it's given me a pretty good foundation upon which to build.
Did you have a point where you had committed to the almost broadcasting side of the sport to say the UFC is the end goal, that's where I want to work for? Or was it something that kind of just happened organically through just following your passion?
I'll be entirely honest, I never thought it was ever on the cards. Just didn't think so. I never thought it could happen. I am a bit of a dreamer, but when I was doing work with Cage Warriors, which was the next most frequent thing, if you like, certainly in Europe, there weren't many other shows that were broadcasting as often as they were. But I've got to tell you, I was earning less than what I was on the building sites, and it was costing me money to go and commentate for Cage Warriors. Compared to what I would be earning, and I wasn't on a crazy salary. So it was never really about that, though. It was just being a part of something. And I have a wonderful team at Cage Warriors, and we were all pulling together. There's some very talented people when I was there. I'm sure I know some of them are still there, and I'm sure that the team they have now are equally as talented. So I was, I wouldn't put myself in that category. However, I was just saying that those around me, everyone was super enthusiastic and wanted to see success. But I did get to a point where I was having some problems with my work. I worked with my dad, and it was just tough working in the family business in a tough industry as well as an electrician. I didn't like the way that the industry was going. So I had this other thing, right? I was involved in mixed martial arts, and the feedback that I was getting was good. People said, "You're really good at this. You should kick on and you could do something with this," but the opportunities weren't there. So I started thinking about just general sporting commentary, presenting, whatever it might be. But people have such a poor opinion of mixed martial arts, or they were calling it cage fighting. It's like, what are we going to do with a cage fighting commentator? Like nothing. And they didn't respect the work that I'd done. So I was in a bit of a negative place because I didn't like the job that I was in. I really wanted to do this. There were no opportunities. And actually, I was having some issues as well at home because, as I said, I was paying to play, and I'm using up all my holiday time, and my wife's sitting at home like, well, what about me? And all I'm doing is working, and then, working again. But at least it was my passion, if you like. So when the UFC decided to expand internationally, it came right at the point where I was finished at Cage Warriors, and I was either going to just probably move on entirely, but they gave me the opportunity, and it was just so ridiculous, the timing, and here we are today.
Fantastic, man. I like to hear those stories because I think everyone kind of has this illusion that they see you on TV and you're just kind of there, and you just kind of like waltzed in your suit into the seat cage side, but there's a lot of hard work and a lot of sacrifice that goes into like all aspects of MMA, from fighters to promoters to broadcasting team. Everybody's got a good hard story. So it's nice to hear how those things kind of happen, and it's not always smooth sailing. You gotta earn your stripes in this sport, especially. John, what I want to ask you is the UK MMA scene is something I want to get to, but it's interesting because from a South African point of view, there's this, over the last few years, there's been this massive cross-pollination between South African MMA via the EFC and a lot of European talent. Guys like Danny Henry comes first to mind. I mean, obviously we had guys like Yannick Bahati who caused a ruckus down here in SA. There's a long list. Callum Murray, Carl Eleanor, and Andrew Fisher, who's in the picture there behind me. Long list of guys.
He's there as well.
Jake Hadley's on his way to the UFC, and that's not even mentioning the South Africans that have gone from here. So I just want to ask you firstly, how I know a lot of those kind of guys that were fighting in BAMMA at the time that have gone on to Bellator and onto the UFC all had some sort of connection to the EFC in South African MMA, because I think there was a channel at some point that was showing the EFC there, so the guys were keeping in touch. So the question is, how would you describe the UK MMA scene now as opposed to when you started, and how familiar are you with what's happening down here in South Africa?
So first of all, not terribly familiar with what's happening in South Africa. For me, my interest gets piqued sometimes, and then I'll dive into it. Like, you know, if, for example, if I had a Don Madge fight to look at, then I'd probably be getting in and around the goings on. I remember when, her name has completely escaped me. Who's the French fighter from Nice who is absolutely phenomenal? She was on the reality TV show that the EFC.
Manon Fiorot.
Manon Fiorot, that's the one. Yeah. So I started watching that reality TV series, weirdly, with some of the other women that were on there that came through the IMAF circuit. And it was great because, you, as you say, a very European international feel that was brought in. But I've got great respect for what EFC have done from all aspects, because they've taken the UFC model, which I think is a very smart thing to do. The UFC have tried every angle. They've tried everything.
Sure.
And I think that the production values that the EFC offer, and obviously trying to just, there's so much talent over there in Africa, and putting that together, that we've seen some really, really good level fighters come across to the UFC and kick on and go on and develop their careers in whichever direction they want to go. But I'm no expert. So sad, but I'm excited for the region. I'm really excited in international mixed martial arts. I'm kind of the international guy, so it's a given that North America, they're always, you know, just going to be so well schooled. There's so many resources available, and with that wrestling background, it just segues so seamlessly. But for us outside of North America, it just seems to be a little bit more difficult. I'd say Poland was maybe a bit different because they're so big into fight sports. It's a bit different over there, but it hasn't captured the imagination over here in the UK. And from when I started out to what it is now, it's a bit more fragmented, especially at the moment after the pandemic. I think before you used to have Cage Warriors, BAMMA, UCMMA, and we had some other promotions going up north a little bit. You had some guys in Manchester, you had some guys in Liverpool as well, and then Northern Ireland. So there were pockets, but right now there are so few promotions out there that are really spiking and providing a path apart from really Cage Warriors. Again, because I'm not involved in Bellator, I don't look at the prelim stuff. One of my teammates, Charlie Leary, is a Bellator fighter. Of course, he's my boy, so I support him, and I know who the players are. But Bellator and BAMMA seem to be that they were, well, the guy who owned BAMMA is now with Bellator. The matchmaker went across as well. So the Bellator Europe scene is like the old BAMMA, but that means that they're not really now going to come in the direction of the UFC, which is where I put a lot of my focus.
Sure.
But also that makes it tricky because Bellator, they're not going to take just anyone with like an entry-level record. So where do those guys go? It is a bit difficult at the moment to now find the promotions where the young pros go to start earning their stripes. I think it's exciting because a promotion will emerge soon to be that kind of springboard. I think Probellum, I'm not sure if they've done anything in Africa, but they've been doing stuff around the Middle East and I think maybe Brazil. Probellum, they look like they have the potential to do that and compete with Cage Warriors as well. But Cage Warriors they're just there all the time, and I just don't see that anyone else is there quite as often.
Sure. You mentioned something quite interesting there at the beginning about the wrestling, and I think obviously watching our local guys here and paying a lot of attention to what's happening in the UK scene, and having guys like that come to mind straight away, Joe Cummins. And you mentioned Poland. There was a Polish fella in his team, Lukas Rudovic, who came and fought here with both of them on the same night. Actually, Joe Cummins won the lightweight title here against legend Martin van Staden in South Africa. Very wrestling heavy based approach, which was interesting to see. And funny enough, the same kind of systems and stuff that we were implementing here. And it's kind of like North America has the style and the system, and the UK MMA scene is kind of slowly trying to catch up to that, and then we're kind of slowly catching up to that as well. And I think that happens kind of all around the world. I know in the promotions like Brave and UAE Warriors, you've got a heavy Russian influence there, so that sort of sambo style wrestling is already there, and the rest of us are trying to play catch up with all of that, which is, it's fascinating to watch. And it's fascinating to see it develop, which is quite intriguing. And I think obviously guys like Khabib have had such a massive influence on how that's being adopted and changed, and new kind of things are being brought in. So it is interesting to see. And you mentioned different pockets of promotions. So, in South Africa, we've obviously got the EFC, which is the one and only real pro promotion, and they do a great job. And then you're starting to see guys like Brave, and there was Aries for a little while trying to enter into Africa, which was, Francis Ngano's former coach, he was heading that up. But do you think it's sometimes, especially at points like now, having like a mainstay like Cage Warriors is a pro or a con? Because you're saying like kind of guys, as they turn pro, if they get thrown straight into the Cage Warriors kind of scene, maybe it's a little bit like too much too soon.
Well, Cage Warriors do such a great job with matchmaking that it's never going to be a real problem. I just think it's nice to have. You need more than one, because sure. the calendar's got to work. You can't all be tuning up for the same dates, and there's only so many spots on that card. I mean, I remember back in the day when I was calling fights, there'd be 17, 18, 19 fights. You're starting at midday to midnight. It's crazy, and I understand that's how these the local promotions make money, etc. But because of the fallout and the turnover. But I think you need more. It's expensive to run a promotion. So to put all of that burden on Cage Warriors would be unfair. But they are obviously the most recognized, I think, now. And they've always been there. There was a little bit of time when they went quiet, and we really missed them in Europe, because they've been such a strong route for athletes to get to the UFC or indeed Bellator. When they go away, you're like, well, what do we do now? Because you've got to go to ACB. Like, talk about a tough circuit. You know what I mean? Or KSW. So it's not that I'm saying that Cage Warriors is any easier, by the way, but it's just you've got to travel. And if you're an early pro, add travel to your new line of work. It's very challenging. It is not sure. That people should not take that for granted. Danny Henry coming to fight in EFC, I think at altitude for one of his title fights. Things like some of the hard. Very hard, You've got to have not just great skills at that point. You're pulling on other disciplines.
Sure.
And I'm not sure that you should have to do that so early on. I just don't. So we do need people to pull up the slack over here. I think the sport's getting there, hopefully. Efforts are being made from a federation standpoint, again, just bolstering that infrastructure. So it's exciting times, but the pandemic's really hurt us. I think we're going to I truly think we're going to have a gap in the talent pool. We've certainly got a gap in terms of the frequency of shows and those shows being able to kick on and offer more opportunities for these athletes.
Talking about talent pool, I want to ask you, obviously, I want to ask you about some South African fighters in the UFC, but who would you say off the top of your mind are the guys from the UK scene that we should be watching? You mentioned young Jake Hadley, who's one of my favorite guys. I love the way he talks. Very exciting guy, but he's got the skills. Who else should be watching? I know Ian Gary was just signed over to the UFC. Anyone else off the top of your mind that we should be keeping our eyes on?
Yeah, honestly, I think if you look at any of the champions coming out of Cage Warriors, they're any of those that are right there at the top. they are on their way. That's for sure. We got some good guys over at Brave as well. You've got Makayev, who I think he's going to be, like he said, just such an incredible amateur pedigree. He's young. There's no need to rush him, but he'll do very well. I have a teammate called Sam Patterson, who's also over at Brave. He's doing really good things over there. I'd like to see him get over to the UFC quite soon as well in the next couple of fights. There are just some really great teams. I've been lucky. I go out as a producer to visit some. Interestingly, talking of Makayev, I'm going over to Manchester to go and visit with Lerone Murphy next week. And in that gym at Manchester Top Team, they've got great coaches, but they've got a real stable of young fighters coming up. You spoke about Birmingham with Yannick. I've been down there and seen those guys at work. Oh boy.
Sure.
Like their amateur guys are the ones that really excite me. Seriously, I'm looking at some of the amateurs that train at Team Renegade and at Canby's at Fearless MMA, where Jake Hadley's from, and I'm like, terrifying, absolutely terrifying. Awesome. In Scotland, they got some good guys coming out. Danny Henry's team, higher level, they got some really good guys as well, and also Team Cowbon. In Liverpool, Next Generation, they got a kid at Next Generation that's the next big thing coming out of Liverpool as well, behind Paddy Pimblett. So listen, we're not sure. We got guys on the cusp.
Sure.
What I am afraid of, and this goes for I can't change my opinion on Ian Gary now either, is the fact that athletes are going to try and get to the UFC a bit quicker now because the money's not as good elsewhere, and the opportunities to compete. They need more so that they can kind of put their risk in certain baskets, and if you're fighting at Cage Warriors, in tournaments and things like that, boy, it doesn't get much tougher than that, and they're very, very risky. If you win, great. If you don't, well, you need to go elsewhere or, stay where you are and win another 3 or 4 on a bounce before the UFC are going to take a look at you. So man, it's such a tough game. It really is.
Yeah, and you gotta walk into the T-Mobile Arena with 20,000 American fans shouting at you and being on the big stage. It's not easy, and that's kind of what I wanted to get to next. Dricus du Plessis, who's really emerging from our side. 2 fights, 2 knockouts recently over Trevin Giles. What do you think about those kind of things, to see sort of smaller market MMA kind of guys, as UK guys would have to do at some point? Like we say, you have to cross over to this madness in the T-Mobile or wherever it may be, with all these fans and stuff, and go out and put on a show like that.
First of all, I'm fascinated by Dricus. Like, he's a superstar, man. He really is. Like, you just look at the guy. Like, I want to know what he's eating. Damn. Like, he must be so disciplined to look like that and to turn out at the size that he is. I mean, he certainly works very hard. He's got the skills as well. He's got the heart. I'm desperate to get to South Africa just to see, like, how is he doing this? What's the setup like? Because when we met Dricus, it was through the pandemic. So everything was really tough for him. He was training in his garage with, is it his brother? Like, he was pulling people in. I can't quite remember.
So it was his brother Neil and his almost protege Cameron Simon, who's a youngster tearing it up here in the EFC. They kind of when lockdown was announced, we had maybe like 2-3 days to kind of do what you needed to do. So they just went and raided their gym and moved their gym into his garage, and they all lived together for 5 weeks. Yeah. So they had a full-on training camp in their garage, which was pretty sick.
Yeah, I mean, you do what you got to do, but again, that's like, you make it to the big show, and yet you have to do it like that.
Yeah,
it feels like any other time where you're an Olympian. Now you're going professional or in whatever discipline it is. You think bells and whistles, right? Everything would now be just beautiful, space, resources. No, we're doing this in the garage, which is, I mean, fantastic. So I'd love to come down and see how everything's dressed up. Of course, I'm a nerd for this kind of thing, and because I go out and see all the different gyms in the UK to understand what it would be like over there. I remember watching Cyborg training at Don Madge's gym or wherever he was training.
Yeah.
And it was a small setup. Like, I'm sure Cyborg, it's very humble compared to like King's MMA or like Shooter Box, something like that. It was pretty fascinating. Like, I loved watching that stuff.
So when Cyborg was here, Richie Kwan, Coach Kwan, who's Don Madge's coach, and she was here with that team. Definitely a smaller style setup, but what we've come to figure out here with that kind of thing is that, you know, if you go to an ATT, for example, and you know, you want to get time with Mike Brown, that's not gonna, it's gonna be hard. You know, you've got to get to the big leagues. Whereas here, it's like the attention is way more personal. You know, Rich is always there, and you've kind of got that access as you need it. So slight difference, but it is, you know, Cybergood was great having her. Yeah, she got to do some cool seminars, and to be honest, I think she would have spent more time if it wasn't for the pandemic. I think she enjoyed the training. It was tough. I mean, I saw her have some horrible sessions on those mats, and you know, I think she was pushed a lot harder than I think she realized she would be, you know, which is cool.
She's going to have a huge target on her back wherever she goes, right?
Yeah.
When you're formerly like the baddest woman on the planet, like, it's like for anyone, any of these champions. And we're all, wherever we are, we're all trying to prove ourselves. And I'm sure that the patriotic side of us, when we have internationals come over, we're going to do our very best. We're showing up to those sessions. Sure. You know, because we want people to go away and talk about how good we are, particularly our gym, our tribe, our coach, whatever it might be.
Yeah. If I can, John, I want to put you sort of on the spot on a few questions, nothing too crazy though. Do you have a favorite fight of all time that you've called so far in your career?
Yeah, I always struggle to answer this one. One, because my memory is so useless, but also there's like different reasons why you might fall in love with a fight. You know, sure. Is it because of the individual that's coming in there? Is it because of the moment? I think about on Fight Island when we had that crazy knockout, Joaquin Buckley. Like, it wasn't maybe the best fight, but in terms of a moment, there was so much going on, and the fact it was Fight Island, the fact the technique was just so outstanding, the drama of the way that it went about. And then I had like my producer, my senior producer's like running over. He never comes over mid-show, puts his own cell phone in front of me with like directions and giving me notes about all of the impressions that they'd had on social media. So I knew something big had occurred. And it's wonderful to be a part of something like that. You just hope you don't say something stupid like I did by saying that's real life ninja stuff. But you know, there's worse things. I could have sworn, which could have been worse. But there's that. Then on the other side, one I always reference is Anderson Silva versus Michael Bisping at the O2 in London. Absolutely. At the time, it was definitely the biggest profile fight that I'd been involved in. UFC Fight Pass was new, and they were doing like a sort of pay-per-view model type thing on there. All of like the big wigs of the UFC were in town, and then the drama. Like, the drama was just ridiculous. Yeah. Then there's guys like Frank Camacho. I don't know if you know, Frank Camacho, always involved in like unbelievable wars. Damien Clark, I think, was it Clark? So I always get the guy's name. I think it's Damien, but I'm not sure about his surname. And I don't know why I keep forgetting that. There's a Damien Clark that I know. I think that's the problem. But they went to war. But if you meet Frank Camacho, he's like the nicest guy ever. So to have that kind of fight style and to sit down with the guy fight week and just like fall in love with his personality and his story from this little island and all that stuff, and then see what he does. It's sometimes those moments mean as much as the occasion.
Slightly harder one, your favorite broadcast partner?
Well, I think just from the reps that we had together, like Dan Hardy, you know, was, as a UK guy, we were very aligned on where we saw the sport in, you know, the short, medium, long term. We both want the very best for these fighters. It's fighters first, and we had a similar kind of energy about that. You know, he was Dan was very good to me as well, in that he'd give me space when it comes to the technical side, because the way that I commentate isn't like the other two guys. So I find this when I go and jump on the mic with the others. I don't know if they don't like it, but I think sometimes they're a bit surprised. And the fans always jump on it, like, shut up, Gooden. And I'm like, well, the way that I see the commentary is a play-by-play, is like, this is my role. I should be telling you what's happening, and they should be saying why it's happening. And so yeah, Dan was very kind to me in that sense. And we got on, like, we're still friends, you know? So it's, he's no longer with the UFC anymore. So then, you know, I now have to formulate a partnership or partnerships that will still help the growth of mixed martial arts internationally. You know, I'm obviously closely affiliated with European MMA, and Paul Felder's a close friend of mine as well. We talk. Well, we were talking last night, for example. So I love working with Paul. DC's just hilarious. Bisping is just larger than life. Brian Stan, when I commentated with Brian Stan, it was one of my most memorable broadcasts. He was such a pro. So, like, we're really honestly, we're so spoiled, and I don't mean to sound like so cheesy, but those guys, like, they've all achieved so much. So from a professional standpoint, do you know how easy that makes my job?
Yeah.
Where I can go anywhere with any theme or any question, and they will have an educated response through lived experience or wonderful articulation, like Paul and Dan do. You know, and they've lived it, of course, but even if they haven't, they've just got a wonderful way with words. And Paul's got the most beautiful voice for TV. People overlook that. You know, he does have a fantastic set of pipes, which I'm very jealous of.
Two things there. Firstly, I did kind of set you up there. I wanted to see you and Dan Hardy. It was just like the perfect synergy for that sort of role. I know I was a massive fan of Inside the Octagon, purely based on I love the style that you two would present, where you're kind of asking him the right questions and then he just ran with it. And obviously you have your own input on, but Dan's got such an amazing way of how he articulates what he's found. You know what I mean? And it's from my point of view as like a student of the sport, I'm always so fascinated about how he does that kind of research. You know what I mean? How does he find this stuff, and what is he looking at? How is is he watching one individual fight at a time, as opposed to, you know, it was, and I got to say, UFC, you've lost half a viewer on Inside the Octagon without Dan Hardy there anymore. But anyway, so, you know, that was such a great synergy, and it's interesting to see how those synergies connect in terms of the commentating booth. You know, like you said, you guys can just arrive with, it could be DC, it could be John Anik, it could be whoever it is, and it always seems to work, which is really, really cool. On that note, John, I wanted to ask you, you've been, and it's something I really appreciate, and I love to watch you give rundowns on the events and those kind of things, but also on your work and how you do these things, and advice for people trying to get into your kind of a position in sports broadcasting and commentating. And I mentioned Dan's say proficiency for research. I've seen you show your kind of notes prep for a fight night. So firstly, what is your main line of advice for a youngster maybe watching this that would want to get into sports broadcasting, and how do you dissect that time into research for a fight night?
Well, the first, I guess my biggest piece of advice for anyone starting out is start from the bottom. Like, honestly, I know there are some outliers that kind of leapfrog over it, but the skills that I learned from like commentating on amateur fights, no people with no experience at all, you've got to find your voice, because there's nothing to talk about. I can't talk about like the fights that he's had or she's had and how good they looked and what team they belong to. There's not, like, I've got to literally take crumbs and make them blossom to fill a walkout or dead time in a fight.
Sure.
And also you've got to be, you can't be like an introvert. Like, I used to run around the changing room while people are getting their hands wrapped saying, okay, bro, like, why are you doing this? Do you have any experience? I've got to get around like another 20 guys, so I can't sit and do a long form interview right now. But so you need to, distill some bits. So what I learned through doing that, and then like gradual increases from like being on a dictaphone and probably no one listening apart from those that bought the DVD or were given the DVD along with their win, like a t-shirt for fighting. Then you go somewhere where maybe it's streamed on some sort of fight portal to eventually get into TV network stuff. But by that time, I'm now a little bit more comfortable and I can work with a producer, because before I'm doing it all by myself, like I'm dictating everything, which is good and bad, so there's pros and cons. So I think just start at the bottom and like find a mentor, but get your own voice, don't try to copy anyone else. Take bits. If you like things, take that. But I couldn't do what Goldberg did. If I say it's all over, like it just doesn't sound the same, because his voice is like big and powerful and American, and mine is English and camp and quiet by comparison, so you just have to find your range. It's a bit like fighting itself. I approach it all the same way. It sounds ridiculous, but because I was a martial artist before a broadcaster, I go into fight camp, and then I keep ready and I look at the technical aspects and I get better with that sort of thing. And I do, if you're trying to do my role play by play, like I really do advocate being a practitioner as well, because there's a vocabulary, and fighters open up to me a little bit more, because especially in the UK, like I've been on the mats with some, maybe not the guys in the UFC, but on the way up, I would train at the gym with the guys that were fighting on the card, and I'd sit down on the mat with them after and exchange stories and find out more about them. And because we've just, what it's like, there's a brotherhood, you punching each other in the face or grappling or whatever it might be, you've earned some stripes there. You've earned a bit of credit. And I think if you can't earn the credit that way, then you've got to earn some credit elsewhere to try and get ahead of the competition. I'm actually putting together a set of courses on asking questions, like interview technique, presenting and commentary. It's something I've been building for about a year. It's coming. It's like I've got a little broadcast academy that's on its way. So, so keep an eye out for that. And then the second question, my process, well, I'm always ticking over. Now it's my job to kind of be across what's going on. So I'm on social media far too much, I guess, but I watch the fights. Like I don't watch fights really as a fan anymore. Like I'll always have a notepad and pen. So whenever I'm watching the fights, which is why it's difficult to do it at night now, I try and do it the next morning. I'll be making notes as I'm going through, because there's a chance I'll be commentating on one of those individuals. So it's building that knowledge base all the time. And if I see an interview or see something on social media, there are apps like I use Evernote, clip that up, throw it in Evernote, tag it so it's searchable, have a system in place where you can start building all of this stuff together. So then you can search it out when it's needed. And then when I get offered a fight card, I then just start diving in. Like I'll be looking at getting all of the right current factual information, like what's their record, what age are they going to be at the time, all of those sorts of things. And then layering it, just adding layers, that when they start getting interviewed by people, I know the people that I go to get the good interviews. And then I'll look at media in certain different parts of the world. I now know which media outlets operate in Poland and Russia and China, so that I'll go there and search and find that stuff again, collect it. So I end up getting all of this information on one fighter, whilst also watching a few, like the last 3 fights is what I normally go to, unless they've got something big in the past. And then I'll just sort through all of that stuff and I'll condense it down. But I'll probably only do that condensing process like 2 days before the fights. So that's one side of things. And that, by the way, is the side that you will do when you're commentating on the up. When you do it for the UFC, however, you have the program elements, which is such a big job in itself. Now, you don't get those elements until maybe a week, 10 days before the fights, and they change a lot. So you can do it all, and then it will change, and it will change, and it will change, and it can change up to 8 times. So I've been burnt in the backside by preparing too early. And then it's changed so many times. I'm so confused with what I've written and what's coming up. I'm actually better off like letting it like sit and simmer for a little while, then come back to it. But like Anik will tell you, we take in over 200 pieces of paper sometimes through a broadcast because of all of the elements. And you need to write scripts for them. You need to know where we're going. So that fight, they come out of that fight, we're promoting this particular aspect of the main event. Out of that main event, we go to a rankings table. What do we want to focus on here? Because we've got 2 other rankings tables and we don't want to repeat that stuff from there. So, you know, you have to think about these things. It's a long marathon broadcast, 6-7 hours, maybe. You've got to get your pacing down and not be too repetitive, and really not just know about those fights, but what's coming up. The next pay-per-view is always being promoted. What's happening there? So there's lots to keep you company in the couple of weeks as you lead into a fight week.
Yeah, that's not just talking on a microphone for all those that think it's an easy job. And that's it from me, John. I honestly, again, I really appreciate your time. It's been massively insightful and really exciting to speak to you. And we're going to see you in South Africa as soon as all of this madness is finished, and come visit Team CIT and FFM and all the other crazy teams and see how we operate down here. I promise you'll have the time of your life.
I would love to. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you, John, and have a great day further, man.
You too. All the best.
Cheers, man. You too. Bye-bye.